Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to
Shalom.
another episode of the Open Peace podcast. It's a pleasure to be joined today by Svetoslav. Svetoslav is currently living in St. Petersburg, Russia, and he's here to talk to us a little bit more about the ongoing conflict. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Svetoslav. How are you, first of all?
Yeah, I'm pretty stressed out actually because of all this stuff. It's not easy living in a country that it's war. It's constant stress and kind of fear, this actually pressured atmosphere.
Definitely. I can definitely relate to that, being in a country that is also involved in conflict very often. It's a very sad state of affairs at the moment. And I wanted to dive right into it. How is the feeling over there in St. Petersburg today? How are the people feeling? What's it like out in the street?
What is it like? So, most of I cannot really tell you what, because I don't go to demonstrations or anything, but what I can
Hmm.
tell you is that most people I know, especially older generations, they support the war. Yeah, most people. I know a few. I know a few people who don't support the war. I know
Hmm.
you can see protest slogans here and there on the floor, on the walls, and I see on the new. I have read on the news the protest demonstrations in St. Petersburg, after which people have been arrested and detained. But I only read about it. I can't see it. And if we talk about my direct surrounding, then most people support the war. This is this feeling of nationalist awakening, if you will.
I see. So it seems like many people, unfortunately, do support the conflict. From a kind of Western perspective, before it started, there was kind of intelligence saying that something was going to happen, coming from the intelligence services. Um, and then suddenly everything seemed to start, towards the end of February, and Putin called this a special military operation and not a war. Is that correct? Is that what you guys hear over there as well in St. Petersburg?
Yeah, actually, the media here are forbidden from using the word war or invasion or assault. So if you are a media outlet or political party and you say war, you can be fined at best, and investigation can be launched against you. You can't say war, you can't say invasion, you can't say assault, you can't say aggression. You are only allowed to say special military operation. It's illegal basically for journalists and media persons to use those words.
I see. I see. That's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. So, from kind of a perspective of people that are supporting the conflict, why do they see the reason for the need for a conflict with Ukraine when there's so much connection between the Russian people and the Ukrainian people? Many people live on different sides of the borders that have, family or roots from each different country. How do they explain the need for a conflict?
Oh, so yes, I, by the way, I also have roots in Ukraine, so yeah, for me it's
I
kind
see.
of personal blow too.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, my great grandma died there in Ukraine, fortunately before the war. So why? Oh, I can
Hmm.
explain why. They say that the Ukraine is a Nazi state. The far right Nazis running the state who are committing genocide against the Russian people and who hate the Russian people, that they're far right Nazis, and that the country needs to be denazified.
So wow. But from a Western perspective, that sounds to us like a really kind of crazy situation when Ukraine has a Jewish president, Zelensky, and many Jewish families and people that live there. And also there is many celebrations that go on once a year over in Ukraine where many Israelis come to famous grave sites of rabbis over there. So to us, it sounds like a real kind of made up excuse. I mean, I don't know what the situation is with Nazis over there, but to frame the whole country as Nazis seems a bit ridiculous to us over here.
Yeah, but like Israel is also compared to Nazi Germany by anti-Zionist propagandists, and I have noticed some similarities actually between Russian anti-Ukrainian propaganda tactics and the BDS anti-Zionist propaganda tactics. There are just like they're trying to frame Israel as Nazi apartheid genocide state that is committing genocide against Palestinians. In the same way, they're over here trying to portray Ukraine as a Nazi genocidal state that is committing genocide against the Russians.
I see what angle you're trying to come from there. I understand. The thing that I'm wondering has always been subjugated to many kind of schemes and propaganda that has always worked against it. Fake news. In 67, when the 6-Day War happened, many people were told that Israel was going to be wiped out or that it had been wiped out, and obviously this was fake news. The question I have for you, from your point of view, do you really see Ukraine as a Nazi state, or is this just an excuse for Putin to go into this conflict?
Okay, so I need to emphasize that yes, there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine, such as the Svoboda Party and the Right Sector Party, if you know what I'm talking about. And they even have the Azov Battalion. And this is really unfortunate that they have a neo-Nazi militia, Azov Battalion, as a part of the military. And they're also naming streets after members of the organizations of Ukrainian nationalists, such as Stepan Bandera and Shukhevich, who have collaborated with the Germans during the World War II. But that being said, I don't see Ukraine as a Nazi state. It's just blatant excuse. Why? Because Ukraine simply does not fulfill the qualifications for the Nazi state. They don't have one party system, they don't have racial laws, they don't have totalitarianism, they don't have a Führer and a cult of personality. They simply don't. They don't qualify. Heck, in 2019, they have changed the president in the democratic election, and they have a Jewish president. So it's just, I'm sorry if I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say such words, but it's bullshit.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I understand. I understand. So, you're saying that there are neo-Nazi elements within certain region on certain battalion of Ukraine, but on a wider scale, you're seeing this being turned into as an excuse for the conflict, which I must say to me sounds very logical. And unfortunately, neo-Nazis and these kind of idealistic thinkers that think in this way, it's not just common for maybe certain place of Ukraine, but unfortunately we see them all over the Western world. There's neo-Nazi elements in the UK, in America, In France, we see, unfortunately, but these are usually, very, very minuscule and they're usually pushed to the sidelines, and they're big minorities where they live.
There are
From
Nazi
your
elements in Russia too.
In Russia too,
There are
yeah,
Nazi,
for sure, for sure.
yeah, and there
I'm
are
sure there are.
Kahanist elements in Israel.
Exactly, yeah. Unfortunately, there are these radicals everywhere we go, unfortunately. But I must say that the majority of people, I mean, I've visited both countries a few years ago, both Ukraine and Russia. Most people are just normal people. They want to just have a good life and not have to deal with war. So that was kind of
Yeah.
my next point that I wanted to come to you with, Svetoslav, is what do you think that the average citizens in Russia and Ukraine, and also across the globe, what can be done to try and, you know, come to a peaceful solution? Because I don't see anyone talking about a peaceful resolution to this. I just see people wanting to get more weapons in and more fighting, and NATO just warned that this could be a very, very long war, which is something I don't want to see happen. So what do you think we can do to push for a peaceful resolution to this terrible conflict?
Okay. So, by the way, when you asked about the reasons and about what propaganda says, I didn't kind of finish.
Ah,
I talked
sorry. No,
about
go ahead.
I talked about Nazism, but it's not just it. They also use. Um, mm, Have you watched Putin's address when he announced his special military operation?
Yes. Yeah. I believe I
Yes,
saw it.
and I also. And if you noticed, he talked about NATO's expansion eastward there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he talked about the empire of lies, so called. And this is a very common theme in Russian propaganda, that we're not at war with Ukraine, we're at war with the West, we're at war with America. America is portrayed as, you know, as the organized. America is pushing us, manipulating it all behind the scenes, and the official line is that the NATO and America are responsible for the war behind the scenes. It is said that due to the NATO's expansion eastward, that Ukraine would become a NATO member, and then the NATO military bases will be established in Ukraine's territory, which would pose a threat to Russia's national security. So the war is largely portrayed as preemptive. We have been provoked. That's the official line.
Mm. I see. I see. So he's kind of using the expansion of NATO as a threat to then legitimately attack Ukraine and potentially others.
Yeah, in Russian Parliament, there is currently bill pending to revoke the recognition of independence of Lithuania.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I
And the
mean,
author of the bill says he won't stop with Lithuania, but he will go after other Baltic states and other states.
I see. I see. So other countries like Estonia, Finland, Sweden, they could also be in danger at the moment.
I don't know about Finland and Sweden because they have never been part of the Soviet Union, but Estonia for sure.
Estonia for sure. I see. I see. You see, to
And
me, it sounds so problematic because these countries now have been independent for over 30 years or roughly 30 years. I don't really understand the need to go and use the kind of expansion of NATO as an excuse for attack. As far as I'm concerned, NATO is a defensive alliance, correct? Like even if Ukraine had joined NATO, which wasn't really gonna happen, even though Putin said that it might have happened. It wasn't really on the cards before the invasion. Kind of the conflict in itself has made this situation now more possible, and with other countries wanting to join to seek to have some kind of defense towards Russian aggression. So it seems to me like a bit of an excuse to go after and go after ex-Soviet lands and try and rebuild the empire. If you see what I mean, from a Western perspective, the Russians are trying to expand territory. Now, I'm not too sure what the real reason is behind it and what's the need for a conflict now, especially after the world just witnessed, a corona pandemic and many people have suffered all over the world. For now, there to be another big conflict on the world stage. I do want to get back to the question that I asked before, though, Svetoslav, is what can be done to try and stop this war? Because it's not going in a very good way at all, and I don't see anyone trying to call for a peaceful resolution. I haven't heard that out of anybody important's mouth.
Well, what can be done to resolve? Well, if you watched Putin's address, you probably remember what goals are, as Putin said.
Mm-hmm.
It's demilitarization, denazification, and he wants to topple the quote-unquote Kiev regime and put on trial those he accused of genocide against the Russian people. So, what I believe that he simply, you have said that Ukraine has been independent for roughly 30 years, but I believe that with his imperial way of thinking, he simply does not take the Ukrainian people nor Belarusian people seriously. And a lot of people here don't. A lot of people here imagine that Ukrainians, Belarusians, just like the Americans, are artificial people. Just like some Arabs say that Israelis are artificial, that they're just a bunch of Hazars or Poles or Russians, whatever. This kind of thinking, yeah?
Okay.
So, his ideology is built on the denial of Ukrainian identity. He doesn't take Ukraine seriously. And I believe that how can you talk to such a person? The only way to peacefully resolve the conflict is on the part of Russia, it should be the acknowledging that yes, Ukrainians are real people, they're not some breakaway province, they exist, and Russia should have this, mentality, paternalistic mentality over Ukraine. This paternalistic mentality be abandoned altogether. We should recognize Ukraine as an equal, which has a right to do whatever it wants, because in Putin's eyes it seems if Ukraine does anything we don't like, we have a right to do whatever. This abusive parent mentality, or abusive husband mentality, when when a partner has been objectified and you act like you have some right to woman's body, for example. And this is mentality that Ukraine must do what we like because we have some right to it. And if Ukraine does something we don't like, then it has provoked us. I want once again to draw this domestic abuse analogy. All abusers, when an abusive husband beats his wife, you said, you provoked me because you did something. This kind of mentality.
Sure.
This is the Russian mentality. And what is vital for peace is relinquishing this mentality altogether towards Ukraine. This is what should be done in part of Russia. As of Ukraine, Ukraine has its own issues because, as I know, there are, as I said, there are neo-Nazi elements, and Ukraine, in order for Western peace, Ukraine must absolutely crack down on its neo-Nazi elements because, for example, Azov battalion that I mentioned. Azov battalion is a part of the National Guard of Ukraine. National Guard. It's unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. The Azov, but Ukraine should absolutely dissolve Azov battalion and put its commanders in prison. And it is unequivocal that neo-Nazi parties should be banned because the right sector and the Svoboda party, they have participated in elections. Yes, the results were absolutely to nothing, but still they participated in elections freely, and they have some of the people like government ministers. So what Ukraine should do is absolutely banning the neo-Nazi parties and organizations and cracking down on them. That's what should be done on part of Ukraine. And I don't know. Well, as I said, we should accept it. If Ukraine wants to be in the EU, then we should just let it go. We should act towards each other as equals. But what else? Because there is, Russian language used to be the second official language in Ukraine, right? Ukrainian and Russian. But
Correct.
in 20, yeah, in 2014, after the Euromaidan revolution, Russian language lost its status. It's kind of similar to the Israeli nation state law, when Arabic used to be official language, but now Hebrew is the sole official language. You know what I mean, right? And there was an uproar in Russia. Russians said that Ukraine banned the Russian language. Ukraine is violating the rights of Russian minority and all that stuff. And this also, of course, should be addressed because no one banned Russian language in Ukraine. This is, of course, misinformation. But just like with Israeli Arabs, sorry, I draw a lot of analogies to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Just like with Israeli Arabs, there is a large Russian-speaking minority in Ukraine, and this issue should be addressed. And another issue that should, of course, be addressed in this context is the Crimean question, and the question of the southeastern Ukraine of Russian-backed so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic.
So these are all they're great suggestions, Svatoslav, and I think they're things that definitely need to be looked at one by one. The question is, can you see Vladimir Putin and Zelensky sitting down to discuss these things, or have both leaders dug their trenches for war and both see that this is the only solution to the issues? Because at the moment, all I'm hearing is more talk of military action, more talk of weapons being bought, and the fighting just continues.
Yeah, as I heard, there have been some peace talks. No.
right at the beginning. Is that right? There was some talks that were trying to be brokered by certain oligarchs at the time.
Yeah, but what we should keep in mind that a lot of people I see are acting like there was nothing, and then February 24, boom, war. No, the military conflict in Ukraine has been ongoing for 8 years on the southeastern Ukraine. 8 years. They couldn't resolve this conflict since 2014. Yeah, since for 8 years. That's longer than World War II. That's longer than Russian Civil War. So there's
Hmm.
definitely something really bad going on. And can I
Yeah.
see leader sitting down? Well, as I said, Putin outlined that he wants demilitarization and denazification. And he said that, and what is demilitarization? And what is denazification? Putin gets to decide what it is. So denazification of Ukraine is whatever Putin says it is. And Putin says that he will not settle for anything other than the total demilitarization and quote unquote denazification of Ukraine. So can I see them sitting down? Yeah, I can see it with Zelensky at least. But Putin, I believe Putin is beyond the point where he mm, he will just try to dictate his conditions to Ukraine, and if Ukraine does not accept them, then the talks break down, and his conditions will be demilitarization and quote unquote denazification. And also, look at yeah, he clearly stated that he will not change his goals. And look at his rhetoric. Look at how his rhetoric has been changing and where his rhetoric has gone after the war started. Because he, in his address announcing the special military operation, he talked about demilitarization and intensification, and now he's openly, did you see it? He's now openly stating that Ukraine as a state may cease to exist.
I understand that those are the things that he said, but in reality, are these things that are actually going to happen, or this is just going on in Putin's head? Because at the moment, Ukraine are being backed by many different countries that see it vital in protecting Western democracy by supporting Ukraine. The Ukrainian people are very adamant on keeping the country whole, as you know, and very much, you know, going to do the utmost to make that a reality. So for Putin to think that, are these just grandiose, you know, ideas that are running in his head that are not that are not based in reality in what's going on in the ground? Because as we know, you know, the kind of the siege on Kiev, which was supposed to take Kiev, didn't go to plan, and a lot of the fighting that has gone on so far in the conflict hasn't gone to plan for Russia. And we also see, I mean, I read an article the other day that there are actually Russians that are joining the Ukrainian forces to fight because they feel that the war is so unjust.
Yeah,
So are we kind of all being led by Putin's madness and ideas of grandiose and a return to empire, where these things, you know, they've passed their course in modernity. We've seen empires collapse, right? Over the last few hundred years, the British Empire, the French, the Ottoman Empire, you know, the time of empires is gone. If you're asking me, how do you view what I just said?
Yeah, but Israel has been existing for 70 years now, and the Arab world is still not backing down and trying to destroy it. For example.
Correct, but it's also a different conflict. It's nothing to do with empire. Over here in the Middle East, it's the conflict. Sure, there's similarities in all different conflicts, but to me, it's a very, very different conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict, to what's going on now in Russia and Ukraine.
Okay, so I'm afraid that Putin won't back down on anything other than taking it all. I'm really afraid of that. But then if Putin tries, I feel that Poland may feel threatened and that stuff. But here, Ukrainians are steadfast. They show themselves as being steadfast and stubborn. And
Mhm.
do you remember the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, for example?
I do, yes.
We have been stuck in Afghanistan for 10 bloody years. And do you remember the US and Vietnam?
Yep, indeed.
Or Iraq? So I am afraid if I could predict that we're just gonna have Vietnam there. It's gonna be Vietnam.
I see. So you're kind of worried that we're not looking at a conflict of maybe 6 months to a year. We're more looking at a conflict that could last a whole decade, potentially, unfortunately.
Yeah, there will be guerrilla warfare, this Viet Cong style warfare. Certain militias, especially, it's really unpredictable if Ukrainian state collapses. But I'm only saying this if no one if it doesn't escalate, if no one intervenes. But
Yeah.
imagine if it escalates, and imagine if someone intervenes, like Poland may feel threatened, or if there's full-scale intervention on the part of NATO. Um, and you know what happened then? Putin has explicitly warned third parties against interfering in the conflict, but I'm afraid that Poland may feel threatened. So what I predicted that it will be Vietnam, it will only be true if it doesn't escalate, and if it does escalate, oh, then we will all be barbecue.
Yeah. If it all escalates, it will be a disaster. I completely agree, and that's why I think it's so important on trying to find solutions, whatever they may be, as fast as possible. I was wondering, from my side of hearing what you've got to say and discussing the issue, is there any chance that maybe a different Russian leadership would stop the conflict, would de-escalate the conflict, would recognize Ukrainian people and their right to exist? Somebody just along the lines of Navalny or somebody like that who's currently in prison. Is there like a viable option for regime change in Russia, or is it just something that's not on the cards over the next decade?
Okay, so Navalny, he is in prison for 9 years now. So is Putin going anywhere? Well, as you probably know, that according to the constitution, Putin may stay in power until at least 2036.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, right?
Yeah. He extended the laws. Yeah, I remember him doing that. Yeah.
Extended the laws. And what that means, that he may stay president until 2036, and it also says that when the president resigns, when his term expires, he becomes the senator for life.
Wow.
So it's in our constitution that all former presidents have a right to automatically become senators for life.
So there's no chance, basically, is what you're saying.
I'm afraid that the only possibility for the regime change in Russia is Putin's death.
I see. I see.
But I'm afraid that, yes, according to the constitution, Putin may stay in power until 2036. But will he live that long? Will he live that long? Who's to say that he will?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen these reports, but there's been many reports in Western media about him not being in the best health, that he may even have had cancer and
because
gotten
they
over
blocked.
cancer. What's that? Sorry?
They're blocked. No, because they're blocked in Russia. The BBC is blocked. Most Ukrainian media is blocked. The Freedom Radio is blocked. The Euronews, Deutsche Welle, like this. What else? The Voice of America is blocked. And
So
the
there's a
Human
big
Rights
blackout.
Watch.
Big blackout on media.
Yeah.
I see. That's very problematic.
Since the war started, I have lost many of my sources of information. Even even Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are blocked now.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy.
And also, all major Hollywood studios have left Russia.
It's such a shame. It's such a shame. I don't really know what to say to you, because I just feel like, the average Russian like yourself is being punished here for decisions that your leader's making, unfortunately. And the sanctions are obviously hitting hard and will probably only get worse. And it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad to hear that Russia's going in such a backwards way.
I think you can understand this as a Jewish person. And after the war started, in days, I started immediately started experiencing bullying, harassment, bigotry, death threats.
That's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm really sorry to hear that.
I'm still getting a lot of hate and bullying, and that's all because I'm Russian.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. As I know, that's what happens to Jewish communities every time there is escalation between Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there in the world, and a lot of hatred towards Jews, and it usually does get accelerated when things are happening over here. It's just, unfortunately, I kind of view racism and hatred as a disease, as a virus that needs to be dealt with. And whether it's Russia or Ukraine, or whether it's Jews and Arabs, whether it's Houthis and Tutsis, whether it's Amari or Tigrays in Ethiopia, I think the poison itself, the virus itself, is the hatred and the racism. And instead of trying to understand that we come from different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds, we all have that unifying factor of being human. And unfortunately, I feel like certain leaders and certain dictators in the world are trying to take the humanity away from its people. But I do believe that, people like yourself and many other Russians and many other Ukrainians that are out there. The same way over here, we have many people that are peace activists, both on the Israeli side and Palestinian side, pushing for a better future. That people like yourself and people that want to live normally with their neighbors can push for that to happen. But I feel like we're going to need
Like your
more
podcast.
support. Pardon? Sorry?
Like your podcast.
Oh, thank you, Svatoslav. You know, we're just trying to do something very small here, you know, by trying to unite people, and hopefully if it can be a domino effect and more people can promote this way of thinking, it will be fantastic, you know. We just want to try and live honestly a better world than what we were brought into, you know, on the backs of World War One, World War Two, and then even after World War Two, there were so many conflicts. There was Yugoslavia, Korea, Vietnam. We mentioned civil wars in Africa. Unfortunately, I think we should get to the point where borders are drawn, countries are where they are, and you know we can live neighborly with each other side by side. That would be my idea of a peaceful planet. But I did want to ask you a couple more questions before I do have to let you go for today, and maybe we can try and get you on again with some of the other hosts. That would be great. The sanctions that have been put on by Europe and America, how are they affecting the average Russian? You did say about a media blackout. What can you tell us about the economy and how the sanctions have affected the average Russian over there?
Yeah, come again.
How have the sanctions affected the average Russian over there? So you know the companies that are leaving, the American companies, the media blackout. How does it affect the average citizen?
Oh, of course, of course. So the economy, of course, the crisis started immediately. The like the exchange rate of ruble has fallen drastically. Yes, there is
Hmm.
fell of ruble, and not just that. Mm, There are prices are going up. Prices are going up. The income of people is going down. The unemployment rate is going up. According to the Russian official data, there will be 2 million new unemployed people uh,
Wow.
now. And a
That,
lot of 2 million new unemployed. And to be frank, even the company my dad is working at is leaving Russia, so he was his job.
wow. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah,
So
my
just to
dad.
put it into perspective for people, you know, that would be like a fifth of the population here of Israel just being unemployed, all in one go, which you know is horrific for one's economy. It's terrible.
Yeah, prices keep going up, and as I said, even my dad will be unemployed. And what will we have? Um, so all the major Hollywood movie studios, as well as some independent studios, have left Russia. They stopped releasing. So McDonald's have left Russia altogether.
Hmm.
Well, McDonald's, I will specify McDonald's sold all its business to the Russian businessmen, so they opened a new Russian restaurant chain at the same buildings. It's called Tasty Period.
Hmm.
So Coca-Cola left, Pepsi left. I talked about Hollywood, but like Leroy Merlin, a lot of other companies are just boycotting, they have left. And so a lot of commodities, they will just disappear from the shops. You know, a lot of them
Yeah.
will just disappear. Like the soft drinks I mentioned, like Coca-Cola and Pepsi Cola. And it will only get worse because I'm afraid that we're in the beginning. People are losing jobs, commodities are disappearing from the shelves, and the prices are going up, and people even, even if we talk about plane flights, people
Yeah.
cannot do that. People cannot leave the country. A lot of people have gone to Georgia or Turkey, but like there is no opportunity anymore even to take a flight out of
Wow.
the country.
So it seems to me like Putin is almost holding the Russian people ransom with this war. Until he wants it to end, he's going to hold you guys ransom. No media, no economy, no flights, no nothing, no jobs. It's almost like he's turning Russia into a prison of his own.
Please
What's that? Sorry.
come again, please.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's almost like Putin is using the Russian people um, as his own prison state by keeping everyone there, by not allowing jobs, not allowing flights, no media, the economy getting worse. And until he decides that Ukraine is denazified, as you said, then there can be a chance for something. And unfortunately, until then, the Russian people are almost like prisoner to what he wants to do. Do you see what I mean?
Sorry, you're absolutely, you're cutting off.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
sorry, but
That's okay. That's okay. No problem. I'll try and ask something else. Um, we did see many at the beginning of the war. There was the famous TV presenter who stood up against the war to say stop the war. We've seen now a star football captain stand up against the war. Are more and more Russians now speaking up against the war and are joining anti-war campaigns? Or is it something that is still deemed very illegal and could get you in trouble in Russia?
oh, it can get you in trouble, of course. For example, according to the new law recently drafted, the spreading misinformation about the actions of the Russian military forces during military operations can get you in prison for up to 50 years. 15 years.
Wow.
15 years.
Wow.
And this law says nothing about Ukraine specifically. It just said spreading misinformation about the actions of Russian military during military operations. There is another law according to which comparing the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany can get you in jail for 15 days.
Wow.
There
Wow.
is like also, there is a guidelines according to which all journalists have to take the information about the war only from official Russian state approved sources.
Wow. I mean, it almost sounds like something out of a book, you know? You can be sent to jail for spreading misinformation, which, you know, it's unbelievable, really, because it just makes journalism and finding the truth to what's actually happening 10 times or even 100 times as hard as it was before.
But
I
a
really,
lot of celebrity,
yeah,
yeah, a lot of celebrities like Maxim Galkin are speaking up against the war. They've been smeared as traitors and so on. But for example, Maxim Galkin, he spoke up against the war, yeah, but he was at the end he had to go to Israel.
mm-hmm.
He's in Israel currently giving concerts, and a lot of celebrities who speak up against the war, uh, getting smeared, getting the events cancelled. Like there was this woman who on camera
Yeah,
stop the war.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she's in Germany currently, so it's really hard.
Very hard to
Very
speak the
hard,
truth.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
There was,
as of
yeah,
the
yeah.
I
Sorry, go
really
ahead.
hope
Go ahead.
I really hope that the leadership does change, but I'm afraid, what happens when a dictator dies? Let's say Putin dies tomorrow. Yes or what? What happens next? Who's to say that some even more crazy and hawkish politician like Ramzan Kadyrov will not come to power? Right? I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
happens if he dies tomorrow, for example.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
It's a
really
difficult
do
question.
hope that. But I have the feeling that if he leaves power, it will be by death or by some mysterious coup d'etat. And if this happens, we don't know who comes to power and what he will do, because there are no major oppositional figures in Russia right now that could seriously take power.
I see.
So
I see.
might as well be someone. Okay. And I don't know. Maybe World War III has already started.
It's a good question. It's a good question to ask. It's a really sad question to ask. Very sad. And I don't know what to tell you. I think that if other countries get involved and we see fighting on multiple fronts, then I think your statement will be very true, unfortunately. And that's why I think it's so important for people like yourself, for other Russian people, for Ukrainian people, and for the wider society all over the world to try and push for a peaceful resolution to this as quick as possible, and to not encourage any more bloodshed. We've seen so many horrific acts and death and destruction. I was working last week at my job, and there was actually a Ukrainian woman here who ran away from Mariupol from the fighting. So she was here with her daughter as a refugee, and it really just broke my heart to see somebody like that over here that's had to run away from their country. Um, and I really do hope that we see a peaceful resolution as soon as possible. And it will take a huge amount of bravery, because as we're seeing that the average Russian person is being put under so much stress with these laws against misinformation, against speaking out, that it makes it very, very difficult for them to get their voices out there. And like you said, the hate that you were getting just for being Russian, we must fight that as well. You had nothing to do with the conflict. You didn't decide to start the conflict. You had no influence in Putin, whether he wants to start this conflict, and you don't run the army. You're not a general. So we must always look at people wherever they're from at the basis of their character, and not just because of their nationality and where they're from. So I want to thank you very much, Svetoslav, for coming on today. It takes real courage to come on a show and talk about peace when your country's currently involved in a conflict. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to our viewers before we end the discussion for today? Any words of advice?
Yeah, I would like to talk about bigotry. Yeah, dear
Mm,
viewers, please, if you see any instances of bullying and of harassment on the basis of ethnicity, please stand up and please
yeah.
speak up. Yeah, and I have the feeling, frankly, that for the reason that Russian people are generally classified white, and whites are the privileged group, uh, the bigotry against Russian people goes generally unaddressed as compared to anti-Semitism or anti-black racism. No one cares. I have the feeling.
hmm No, I agree with you there, Svetoslav. And I think anyone that knows a little bit about Russian history will know how much the Russian people have sacrificed in the past and continue to sacrifice currently. Um, Always been under huge forms of oppression. Um, and I really do hope one day that people will start to see the wonderful things that Russia does have to offer to the world. Like I said, that I visited your city, St. Petersburg, and for me, it was one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to. It's an amazing place, amazing history, amazing art, amazing literature. There's so much to see and so much to learn. So I really do wish that we get back to a peaceful state of affairs and that the world can go back to how things were pre-COVID, and that countries can start being responsible with the way they are behaving towards one another and show some neighborly love. Because as we mentioned at the start of the podcast, something that many don't realize, the Ukrainian and Russian people in intertwined one with another. There's many people with Ukrainian roots that live in Russia, and there's many people with Russian roots that live in Ukraine, and many peoples have worked or lived in each place. And we just really hope that the war ends as soon as possible and that people can go back to living normal lives. That would be great. Be fantastic. So thank you very much, listeners. Thank you for being with us today. Hopefully we'll have Svetoslav back soon, hopefully to speak about more ideas on how to spread peace and how to promote living together neighborly with one another. And yeah, we'll be back soon. Thank you very much, Svetoslav, for being part of the podcast today. Any last little thing you want to say just before we head off?
Yeah, stay safe, please. Stay safe, everyone. And
Yeah.
I hope
Hey,
all your relatives all have good lives. But please, think for yourself, okay? Think for yourself. Don't be vulnerable to propaganda. Resist disinformation. Resist fear mongering. Resist hate mongering. And don't fall for militarism or xenophobia. I'm
100%.
currently, I'm telling you that right now I'm reading 1984 by George Orwell, and it's a very
Mhm.
time. The sales of this book actually rose in Russia since the war started.
Crazy. We're almost living it now, eh? Maybe he was wrong on the date, but we're living through this craziness now. I just want to thank you again for taking part in the podcast. And what you said there, think for yourself. I think that's one of the most important messages to take from the pod today. Really try and think for yourself, and don't be sucked into the kind of group think that unfortunately is out there. So, thank you so much, Svetoslav. We'll keep fighting the good fight against xenophobia and bigotry and racism on our side of the podcast. And hopefully you can continue doing that great work over in St. Petersburg. And we'd like to welcome you back anytime you want to come on. Maybe we'll try and bring on a Ukrainian guest as well. And we can try and make a nice pod out of that. So thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, Svetoslav. And we'll see you guys next time on the Open Peace podcast. Thank you so much.
I hope I will be here once again.
Sure thing. You're welcome back anytime. Anytime, my friend.
Thank you.